Party people, what's happening with you? Welcome back. It's another week, another amazing conversation here at the TRENT Project. We are so excited. You could have spent your time anywhere and you chose to be here with us tonight. And for that, we are grateful. Listen, we know football is back. Woo-hoo. That don't change nothing here though, because it ain't gonna have nothing on y'all. Y'all missed the Hall of Fame game. Who care about that? This is the conversation you want to be around. So please go over to YouTube, share this video, drop it in the link and wherever Discord, conversation, group chats you might be in. Invite somebody in here, man. We're gonna have a phenomenal conversation as always, and I am excited for it. Shout out D, Luke in the building for, of course, the continual episodes of this and everybody else, man, in Maverick.tv, Twitch, YouTube, man. We're so grateful to have you. And if you were here last week, okay, we did have some homework. Of course, the homeworks that we're kind of pivoting to are definitely linked in the bottom of the notes. So we do have some fresh notes, of course, with this topic tonight that are dropping in the comment section. If you just type !notes, you should be able to see that link as we are opening our discussion. And then, of course, having the intro video along with it. Man, trying to think of anything else. No, I don't think I got anything else. You got anything to open up? You good? Cool, man. So let's pray into this and let's just get this conversation rolling, man. I'm excited and I hope you guys are too. Lord, we thank you. We love you. We ask for your presence and your wisdom in this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Maverick fam, welcome back to the Truth Project. Today I want to talk about something that I don't think gets enough attention. It's something that we all recognize, something we all know we need to do. But when push comes to shove, it's something that we usually push off to the side because it's not fun and it can be very uncomfortable in the moment. And what is it that I'm talking about? It's forgiveness. Hey, Luke, do we have enough time to do like a little effect? You know how SpongeBob has like the little forgiveness. All right, never mind. You don't got to do that. Anyway, it's a big deal. And it is mainly because I think we misunderstand the process of forgiveness and what it does for us spiritually. And it's because we miss it, we just push it off to the side because we think it's something that's like extra credit. We're like, okay, cool. I did the whole raise my hand, Jesus thing. I'm born again. I love God. And then, yeah, I'm supposed to forgive, but you know, I'll get to it. Now, I'm telling on myself because that was your boy 100%. And it's because I grew up with so much bitterness, so much resentment, and I would use it thinking that stuff was good. Some examples I give you is maybe if someone talked crap about me, like I love to prove people wrong. That was my thing. Okay, so maybe you said I wouldn't be good at basketball or I'd never achieve this, right? I would keep that as a chip on my shoulder. I would think about that person, get mad when their name would come up, and it would make me work harder. And so I would think it was a good thing. And maybe I would hold on to resentment from certain people because they did me wrong. And I was like, okay, so they're bad. And this is good because it keeps me away from them. And so as I'm starting to read the Bible and hear how freely I'm supposed to give forgiveness and how open I'm supposed to be to people doing things to me and me just letting them go free without having to get revenge. That was a new concept for me. I was all about revenge, but it wasn't until I got older and I wanted peace as well. I wanted everlasting joy. And I wanted some of these things that are supposed to be fruit of the spirit, but I was like, yo, what's up? I'm a Christian. I go to church every week, bro. Where's my peace at? Where's my joy? And I didn't realize there was a whole lot of scripture on forgiveness for a reason, because these are the things that prevent us from accessing those. And so there's these higher spiritual experiences that we want to have, but we won't give up the low, gross, animalistic, maybe passionate behaviors that anchor us from ascending to those higher spiritual experiences. And one of those things that anchor us and drag us down is unforgiveness. I'm gonna do my best to be quick here because I know I can be a little bit long-winded in these videos at times, but there's 5 areas that we suffer every single time that we hold on to unforgiveness, okay? And I'm gonna go through them quickly. If you guys check out the notes that we have, I give even examples and break things down a little bit more, all right? Use exclamation notes either on Maverick.tv, Twitch, or YouTube, and we will drop the link for you. And you can go and make your own copy. You can add notes, all of that. But in here, I go over the 5 sufferings of unforgiveness. I have some great scriptures for you guys to meditate on. There's 10 different study questions that I think you guys should get to, that I think will really transform how you view this topic. And then there's some suggested homework readings as well. Okay, we do this every week. Again, exclamation notes in the Chizat. Now, these 5 areas of suffering that are on your notes as well. And this happens every single time. You may not even notice it because sometimes it's subtle, and I think that's how the devil likes it. It's nice and subtle. You don't notice it. Kind of like them extra calories when you're eating all that fast food. Okay, you don't feel fat overnight. You look back 6 months, you like, oh my Lord. And you look at your DoorDash history, you like, that's a lot of money. I could use in other places, right? It slowly adds up and it sneaks up on you. But here's the 5 areas. Number 1, you have your heart. All right. And I'm gonna jump into the second one immediately so I can explain the difference between the two. You have your heart and you have your mind. All right, these are 2 areas you're suffering in anytime you hold on to unforgiveness. So we know what the mind is. That's just the constant mind chatter, the thoughts that you always have going on in your head. Now you have your heart. Now your mind is like a computer. It doesn't feel emotions. That's where your heart comes in, right? And we know spiritually your heart also it's not just your emotional center, but it's also where your deep motives are. Okay, and that's why God needs to be number 1 in your heart. But so we have our heart that's like our feeler, and then we have our mind that's our thinker. Okay, these are 2 areas that you suffer anytime you're holding on to that unforgiveness. Again, we can unpack this a little bit more after the video, or check out the notes for more. Now, number 3, the third area is the body. Okay, now your own experience and even science will tell us that the stress that we hold on to, it doesn't just stay there in our mind or in our heart and our emotions. It really manifests. Again, depending on the source that you're looking at, people will say anywhere between 50% all the way to 95% of the illnesses for people in the hospital right now are stress-related illnesses. Like, stress is a really big deal. And it could be manifesting in small ways like back tension, headaches, migraines, things of that nature, or actual disease, all right? Diseases in your body. And so we want to be mindful of the unforgiveness that we're holding on for those 3 reasons, but we got 2 more, okay? Number 4 is your relationships. Not just with yourself, because all the heart, the mind, the body, that's a relationship you have with yourself, but also with others, okay? Not just in the ways that you may be distant from the people that maybe did you wrong but deserve forgiveness. Okay, so there's distance there, but you hold on to all that stuff. Okay, with those blockages in your heart, the questions you have in your mind, it impacts your current relationships and how you show up in those. And so it's very important, again, for those 4 reasons that are also in your notes that I expand on all this, that we want to make sure we're being forgiving. And the last suffering that you have when you are unforgiving is in your circumstances. All right, and it's small little ripple effects that you may not notice, but again, it's could be how you're moving in certain areas or ways that you're isolating yourself. And so you may have unforgiveness from an individual from 10 years ago and it's still impacting you today. And it could be in ways, showing up in ways that you make money, that you show up in your career, that you show up as a leader or a son, a daughter, all of these things. And so there's 5 sufferings that's going on, not just one, when you're holding on to unforgiveness. And so that's why it's important that we understand this, we actually practice in it. And as we do that, I genuinely believe that forgiveness works as like a spiritual ladder. The more you work on it, and it may be painful in the heart, okay, and in the mind as you're doing it, but the more you do it, you start to realize that, oh, okay, God, this isn't something you want me to do just because it's the right thing. You want me to do it because this is how I was meant to live as a citizen in the kingdom of heaven. This type of freedom, this type of joy that I've been praying for is now possible, that I'm not holding on to all these little things and I'm moving in forgiveness. From how most people go about their spirituality, I would call this a superpower. Now, it's not really a superpower like a Spider-Man Marvel type thing, but I think your experience with life will be dramatically different than the people around you that claim to be spiritual but don't practice this. All right, that's my point. I love to talk about it. I want to open up the discussion here by asking you, is there any person, people group, or maybe organization that you struggle to offer forgiveness to? Now, of course, you can do the easy ones and say something like Hitler or Diddy or insert whoever, the world loves to hate. But I want it to be personal, man. Maybe it's your father. I know I struggled with that for years, just based off of his relationship with my mom and things I had heard, and even his relationship with me. And it took me some years to work through that just before his death. But who is it for you? That's what I want to know. Let's get this conversation going. And this is the recorded version of me, but the live version of me will pop up soon, and we'll break this down even more.
Man, I'm excited. I am so excited. This is a good conversation. I think this is a deep conversation. This actually takes me back to quite a few conversations we've had over on this platform. If you guys have been a part of previous conversations, we've talked about forgive and forget. What does that look like? Is that something we can legitimately do? We've kind of dove into that. I think we had a whole series on forgiveness, I think, at one point. And so if you guys want to go back into the catalog and check those out, I think that will give you even more greater context to tonight's conversation that I think, in much like any other conversation we have, go in more plethora directions that are beneficial to the conversation. So you know how we rock. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Bishop D, because he's going to open us up with some thoughts. And you guys go ahead and type in your questions, your thoughts, answer the questions as we get this conversation going.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And like he said, y'all, exclamation notes in the chat to get the notes so you guys can follow along. And we got some really good study questions in there that I promise you, man, if you were to take the time to really meditate on this stuff and make it practical for your life, you're going to see improvements. And I think the reason this Truth Project exists is not because we think we're better than church and that you guys should skip going to church. It's just there's a lot of people that use it as like a check mark in their week, and they go and maybe they might even read on the regular, but if we're being honest, their life doesn't change. And they're still complaining about the same things that they did before they got saved. And there's no real difference in their life. And if you were to actually read your Bible, that's not the case. That's not what God is looking for. God isn't looking for you to remain the same. There actually should be a change in your experience to life. And I think it's because we spend a lot of time hearing preaching about forgiveness, but we don't actually go out and do it. And that's with everything, not just forgiveness, but we're good at hearing it and often even memorizing it. And we could quote all the scriptures, but we can't live them out. And so I just want today's conversation to be all about practicality, and maybe you guys sharing some of the things you struggle with most about forgiveness and why it may be hard for you with certain people, certain areas of your life. But I think it really changed for me when I realized it wasn't just a rule, and that there's 5 areas. So I talked about the 5 areas of suffering and unforgiveness. So if you just get in here and you didn't catch the whole video, this is also in the notes for review. But there's 5 areas that we suffer when we choose to be unforgiving. All right. Number 1 is in our heart. Number 2 is our mind. 3 is our body. Number 4 is in our relationships. And 5 is our circumstances. And in varying degrees, every single one of these gets impacted every time you're holding on to unforgiveness. But on the opposite end, every time you forgive, you actually heal in these areas. And so there's some of us that are holding on to grudges and pains, and we got all these blockages in our hearts and we don't know why. And it's like, man, you keep praying, you keep trying to pray it away, but you don't ever reach for the forgiveness. And I think if more of us were to embrace that, we'd see a lot of areas that are in pain, not only healing our life, but like I said in the video, we'd access some of these things that feel off limits right now, like peace, okay, and maybe certain levels of joy. So yes, that's where I want to leave it. But please, we need you guys' involvement. This is an interactive experience, okay? And so let me know where that lands with you when you hear this conversation of unforgiveness. Who do you struggle to unforgive? Ironically, for some of us, it's ourselves. And maybe that is you. Maybe you guys struggle to forgive yourself. I want to hear some of that. And of course, if you have any questions, drop those below. But I know you be throwing it to me, Grape. I like to hear your intros, though, because they're low-key better than mine. So When you hear this conversation, where does your head go?
Man, So first off, shout out to Serthly in the Twitch chat. He said, stop trying to come after me, man. So I think this is going to be a good conversation for a lot of us, man, in here. I would say, before we get into some of these thoughts that are dropping in here, one, forgiveness, man, I don't know how long I've heard messages on forgiveness. As long as I've been in church, I grew up in church. I mean, knowing that the Christian faith is one that is one of, obviously, predominantly, I would say one of the main themes is forgiveness. Obviously, we see what Christ did, who Christ is. It's one of those things that people on the outside looking in look at it as a free pass, and people on the inside looking out look at it as a roadblock. It's really interesting seeing some of that dynamic, because you'll even see studies. I actually recently came across a study that people actually came together and put some kind of list together on why being unforgiving could be healthy. Depending on certain circumstances and situations. There are scientists, data, and statistics that will tell you that when you forgive, there in some way, shape, or form seems to be some psychological warfare of the opportunity for the person that you forgave to come back around and not only do the same thing again, but to actually feel as if now they have more room to do it because it's now seen as okay. Whereas if you were unforgiving, then not only is that boundary drawn, but you actually are able to move beyond the offense in some kind of way. I mean, there's a lot of studies around it. So, of course, this topic goes deep. And I think if you go in the psychological space, it's not to say that you won't get any benefit of it, because you'll grow in awareness of what's out there. And I think there are maybe very few pieces of information outside of, or I would say away from what I just described that could be beneficial. But this is a spiritual component. This is a massive spiritual component. And when it comes to healing, when it comes to growing, when it comes to transformation, out of all areas to heal, if you do all of them outside of spiritual healing, you are not healing. You are learning. You perhaps are having psychological differences. You are perhaps growing in your mental understanding of things, comprehension of things. But growth doesn't really happen, because without the spiritual foundations, you are banking on your own understanding. And when your own understanding can no longer give answers to situations and circumstances that you're in, why they're happening to you and how to move about it, you will always remain stuck. You will not be progressive. You will not move forward. You will kind of remain in a really broken cycle of dysfunction and frustration, lack of peace, and more importantly, just no true transformation that starts inwardly before it's ever outward. So there's a few passages of scripture that I think about when it comes to forgiveness. Genesis 50:20. Shout out to Robert Madu. Y'all know how I rock over here. He's been the pastor of the year for the last year or some change. He has a message on forgiveness that's titled The Law of 50-20. And it's all about working up to Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. If you guys remember that context, Joseph was actually presented in front of his brothers years after they had betrayed him, threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery. We see him go to jail, being lied on about Potiphar's wife. He comes back, chief and a baker, all that good stuff, right? He becomes leader. A famine hits the land. He is planted there. God is watching over him, doing amazing things in his life. His brothers show up, and instead of him repaying what they did to him, he forgives them. This is the line that insinuates the forgiveness. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Okay, this aspect of forgiveness and him receiving them back. This speaks so much volumes, too much volume for me to even get into this little intro. But I do think that it takes Joseph. This is probably the big key that I want you guys to kind of catch out of this. If you read the entire context of Joseph's story from age 17 to this point, it takes him about, give or take, over 20 years, 20 plus years to get to this point of him being in front of his brethren and this very line being said. Okay. So in some aspect, forgiveness is a process. Right. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would like to get to you in that portion. But if we travel over to the New Testament, because some of y'all don't like the Old Testament, I feel it's old, it's janky, but it still works. If we go to Matthew chapter 6, verse 14, this is actually in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus teaches. And he gives in this very chapter on prayer, giving, and fasting. These are three elements in the spiritual walk that are very, very important for us to continue this walk in an effective way. Having a prayer life, having a generous life, and of course, fasting is actually probably one of the last ones that he speaks to in this entire session. And of course, fasting isn't as predominant, but it is something that allows us to remain disciplined in some areas. Because if we all know somebody who probably fasts and tries to fast away from temptations and just throws a fast on any and everything, but we see that nothing really happens, well, that's because fasting is not supposed to be used for that, right? It's actually having a whole nother component. But of course, this topic is on forgiveness, so I won't sidetrack there. Look at Matthew 6, verse 14 through 15 if you have your Bibles. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive you, and for not forgive your sins. Okay. And so we get the principle of forgiveness. So in Genesis 6 or 50 verse 20, we have a process of forgiveness. In Matthew 6, verse 14 through 15, we have the principle of forgiveness. The principle of forgiveness is basically this one line as a believer: Christ has forgiven us. Okay, so forgiveness is a process, and I ought to aim to work to a place of forgiveness because ultimately Christ has forgiven me. And if I withhold that, then I'm not able to actually, have my own sins and trespasses forgiven in my life. Okay. So then we'll actually travel back in Matthew. We'll stay right here for the third and final chapter that I'll reference in this conversation, along with the others that are mentioned in the notes. You guys definitely want to check that out. Matthew 18, verse 21. And this is a really phenomenal verse in forgiveness because he says, then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you that 7 times, not 7 times, but 77 times. And then, of course, we have the literal analysis of Matthew, almost seemingly as if we can count the times we forgive somebody. Okay, you got 77 times with me, but that 78th, it's over. I want to hear no more, right? And we see Peter kind of issue and approach this conversation by asking, okay, is there a limit to forgiveness? Jesus basically takes the cap off of that and says there's an unlimited amount of forgiveness. And of course, it comes back to what we discuss in Matthew 6, because Christ has forgiven us, right? And his forgiveness is unlimited. His love is unlimited. His grace is unlimited, right? And it doesn't mean that we take advantage of these things, but we recognize that we can't really walk this life effectively under Christ if we are limited to forgiveness, right? And so we have the principle, we have the process, but then I would actually probably categorize this as the pain in forgiveness, actually, because it's not really something that's too receiving to suggest to somebody that they need to be forgiven multiple times because of an offense they've caused you. But when I think about Jesus extending this, I'm actually going to point to a little bit of a commentary. And this is actually something that I kind of like here from David Guzik, one of my favorite commenters throughout the scriptures. And he just basically answers this. Jesus answered unexpectedly, saying we are to forgive the repentant an unlimited number of times. Unlimited is surely the idea behind up to 70 times 7. It would be strange if Jesus expected us to count offenses against us up to 490 and at the 491st offense to deny forgiveness. So again, the math of 70 times 7, I think I said 78 at the first time. It's not addition, it's multiplication. So of course it'd be way greater. But here's what he says. He quotes an individual by the name of France. He says his allusion to Genesis 4:24 neatly contrasts Lamech's unlimited vindictiveness with the unlimited forgiveness of the disciple. So if I travel to Genesis 4:24, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And so again, in that context, that refers to Cain and Abel, and Cain killing Abel. And, Cain had a mark on him to let other people know that he was not supposed to be killed and touched. He committed of course, in the scriptures, the first murder among human race. And, Lamech being punished a greater amount of times than Cain if he were to have destroyed him. And so Jesus kind of reverses this in the aspect of forgiveness. So you have the principle, you have the process, and you have the pain. But I actually think that what I want to cap all this off is that there is a power to forgiveness. And I think that comes back to the old conversation that we're having here, the spiritual superpower that is forgiveness. And of course, again, it comes down to having a spiritual component, a spiritual relationship, a spiritual connection to Christ in order to walk this out. But the power in forgiveness isn't necessarily the idea of letting somebody off the hook. It's not necessarily the idea of giving somebody the power over me because I'm just letting things slide, or I'm sliding it under the rug, right? I'm throwing it under the bus. I'm forgetting it. Right. I'm trying to forgive and forget. So it's not something that's on my mind. Of course, we've had our conversations on that. We might touch on that tonight. But I think the power in forgiveness is literally having the capability to release somebody of a debt you feel they owe you based on the things they did to you. That actually allows you to walk in freedom, no longer chained to the mishandling people have caused you. I'm going to repeat that in a different way. Forgiveness is the ability to release somebody of a debt that they owe you, or that you feel they owe you, because of their mishandling of you. So oftentimes what we really want to respond with is an action of vengeance. And any way I can get back at you would be satisfactory to me, because the score is even. And I can actually feel like I can go on about my life. When truth is, when you lock in on this vengeance piece, you actually halt your life, because now your life is all about getting back and getting even with this individual and making them feel everything that you felt, or an ounce of what you felt. And you no longer are able to move forward into the promises and purposes that are in front of you that were actually meant for you to live. How many offenses can you reflect on that once you got over it, depending on how long it took you to get over it, you look back on how long it took you to get over it, and you're like, bro, I wonder how much life I missed out on here because of how much this offense really had a grip on my emotions, on my mind, on my heart. And it really kept me from living forward. It's almost like if you were to get on a track, obviously, if you have so many events, obviously shout out to the Olympics, but you got hurdling event. Sydney McLaughlin. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of her. That girl is phenomenal at hurdles. I mean, she's great. I mean, I've never seen hurdles ran almost perfect compared to her. I could never do it, and she's great at it. But what's amazing about running the hurdles is the hurdles don't disappear. The hurdles are there intentionally. It's literally something that is in the way of the main run to the finish line, right? But what's so crazy is her jumping over that doesn't change, or the hurdles that are in front of her doesn't change the purpose for why she's running. And it doesn't change the intentionality to which she runs, but she understands that these hurdles are something that she has to get over in order to continue running the race that she has put herself in position to, and to complete it, to compete in it, and to ultimately win it. Allow these hurdles to represent offenses in your life. How many times people have talked about you, how many times people have done you wrong, how many times people have cheated you, how many times people have just flat out wronged you unnecessarily, and it's greatly hurt you, cut you deep. And so many of us, when the gun goes off for the race that God has set before us to complete, or to run to a place of completion, to finish well the life that God has called us to live, when those hurdles start showing up, we don't even run. We just stay at the starting line. And we continuously point out how much this person has hurt us. We write books about how much this person's hurt us. We make videos about how much this person has hurt us. We make podcasts about how much this person has hurt us. I mean, we literally make so many posts, exclamations, all those kinds of things in an attempt to cover up our wounds with the idea that we're helping other people be protected from this person that has slighted us in any kind of way. But in reality, we're living offended. An offense was caused, an event was caused, but yet it was not the offense that was the culprit to living offended. It was our reception of the offense and our ability to give so much power into the offense that turned us into living offended. To now, it doesn't matter how I look at this person or how I look at anybody else that's running from me, running next to me. I just wake up mad. I wake up mad. I wake up salty. I do it all, right? Because I'm just living a life of being offended. So just tying this all back to the analogy that I started off with, I wonder how much you've literally delayed the race that God has called you to because you see the hurdles in front of you of the offenses that have come, and knowing that there are more offenses to come, because there's never just one hurdle that anybody in that race has to jump over. There's multiple. So you look at the hurdles that have popped up in front of you from the offenses that have been caused to you, knowing that there are more to come behind that hurdle that's in front of you. But instead of running, you stop. You stare, you make your life about the hurdle instead of realizing that you have the power to overcome that hurdle by remaining focused on your purpose and not allowing that hurdle to keep you from living the life God's called you to, running the race that God has called you to. And I think if we're honest, man, all of us in here have somebody who has done us some kind of wrong in some area that has halted us from living a life, man, that is more fruitful, more beneficial, more freeing, and in a lot of ways actually allow us to get back our peace, our smile, our joy, because there was such a level of offense that crossed our path that we didn't make the decision to jump over the hurdle. We made the decision to make our life about the hurdle. We made the decision to be so intimidated by the hurdle, forgetting all the things that we've done, forgetting all the things that we've caused to others, forgetting the egregious offenses that we've caused to God, that we've just remained still, feet in the mud, in quicksand, unable to move forward. And I think if we actually value our direction, our purpose, our calling, and if we really want to get to that version of ourselves that is not so willing to catch everything that's thrown to us, but is able to continue moving forward through the lens of the purpose we're called to. It's not to say offenses won't come, but it does give us the power, the supernatural, the super on top of our natural, only by way of God, to actually overcome those hurdles by way of focusing on what God's called us to do and finishing the race well, instead of remaining at the starting line, never taking a move in the same place that God found us in. To step into our calling is the same place God discovers us in when we encounter him crossing from this time to eternity. And when it's time to explain, we can't even really give a good explanation for why we didn't do what he's given us, because we were too busy caught up on offenses that people threw in our face, and we lost track of the race that we were called to. And it's demonstrative to so much that God has placed in us. And there are people that are waiting for you on the other side of that finish line, that you have something in yourself to invest into, to help them in their race, at their pace, for where they're going, and where they're headed. And so, man, let's talk about this. I ran it long enough. These long-winded rants, they kind of build up over the week, but let's talk about it, man, because I think we are in a culture and a time where nobody is willing to let go of anything. Everybody is quickly offended, and everybody has something to say and a piece of their mind to give when a disagreement occurs to some opinion that they hold. So let's unpack this, because I think as much as you claim you're free and you're good because you got a good clapback game, I would say you're in bondage, because not everything requires a clapback. And there are people who are just not in the vicinity of your capacity that deserves a response to something that they did or said about you. So let's unpack it. Let's talk about it, man. I'm excited. I see a lot of good comments in here too. I'm gonna start with Hayes, man. I have a different issue.
Oh, my fault. My fault. Yeah, I was really rooting you on. I was muted.
No,
Jay, good job.
You're good.
You was killing
You're good.
that.
Yeah. Hayes said, I'm going to get to the other things in a minute, but I get you, Twister. I mean, I was just talking about the racers, but I feel you, man. Hayes said, I have a different issue where I jump the hurdle, but turn around and keep looking at it despite it being behind me. Ooh, Hayes. Come on, Hayes. I love it. Come on. Have a hard time letting anything slide, even if it's not a big deal anymore. Yeah. It usually is motivation. I live for I'll show you, but this also means I hold things far too long. Yeah, I would love these thoughts on this. Of course, I'll warm it up. Looking back, I actually just did a TikTok on this, man. I'll be brief. I didn't get to go as deep on that TikTok as maybe I might be able to here. If you guys remember Lot's wife, if you remember Lot's wife, as they were leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, angels came and rescued Lot out of there, and they continued to tell them, whatever you do, don't look back. And if y'all recall, what does she do? Look back. And when she looks back, she turns into a pillar of salt. And it was crazy. And I think about that often because it is in the action of looking back that not only you are unable to embrace moving forward, but it's because you're rehearsing so much you feel you're leaving, you become stuck and immovable. And because you become stuck and immovable, rehearsing what's behind you, you actually put yourself in a cycle of dysfunction, and you blame the people that hurt you as if they put you there, when really you are the one who made the decision to stay. You made the decision to stay at the offense, at the event of the offense that was caused to you. This is the part of the accountability that we don't like. Because as much as the offense hurt, and we would love to blame the people that have hurt us, harmed us, offended us in any kind of way, from the slightest to the greatest, we want to put and attribute all of that to them. If they would have never said that to me, if they would have never done that to me, if they would have, well, bro, Sean, I get you. I hear where you come from, but you don't know what I've been through, bro. Like that stuff is crazy. And I'm not trying to minimize the offense and the egregious of it is, because there are probably a lot of people who could ever hear this message who have been through the craziest things, from sexual assault to domestic violence, to being cheated on, to being raped, to being offended, to being molested. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we're talking about a lot of heavy work. And that's where I actually meet a lot of people in this theme of a process to forgiveness, because we as much as we talk about forgiveness, there's some aspects and attitudes where we say, hey, it's immediate. When truth is, man, there's so much stuff that happens psychologically to us when we're in pain. It's hard to see that. Yeah. It's hard to see a lane of forgiveness anywhere. And sometimes that lane of forgiveness doesn't clear. The debris doesn't clear until we actually have to unpack the emotional wound that was caused to us and actually nurture ourselves back to a place, obviously not really ourselves, but through counseling, coaching, therapy with God, with a relationship with God and community with other people. We are getting nurtured into a space where we're able to build back to this idea of revisiting a forgiveness angle. But I think when we look back, man, we put ourselves in a place of being stuck. And if we really want to embrace the power that God really has for us to walk in, if we really want to experience God's love and transformation and light in a way like never before, we have to stop rehearsing the things that people have caused us as a means of coping. I understand the aspect of grief. I understand the aspect of mourning over what you've lost. But imagine if Joshua stayed at the bottom of the mountain when Moses died and never took a step forward to where God was calling them to, which was the promised land. And now Joshua being next up, we wouldn't even have a writing about who Joshua was or the legitimacy of his leadership. What would happen if Samuel never stopped mourning over Saul, the one whom God rejected as king, and out of Samuel's life? Would we have ever gotten to see Samuel journey to Jesse's house, where he finds David, who's a shepherd boy, who is anointed, and now, of course, over time, comes back to lead and become king. Like, there are so many things, man, that we look back on and we rehearse over and over again. And I'm gonna be honest, that I think is a weight that we put on ourselves more than we realize, because sometimes it's easier to let go of things than it is to hold on, but we hold on to it because in some way, shape, or form, we feel better about ourselves if we have somebody else to blame. And we feel better about ourselves if we have something else to just project all this pain to. And in some case or scenario, we, even though it may not be something that we ask for, and a lot of times it's not, we do have a really, really big obligation to take accountability for where we are now, despite what happened to us, in order to move forward. And if we keep rehearsing that thing, we'll never move forward. That will have a halt on our heart and lives for years. Before you know it, it's 20 plus years down the line. And now not only are you believing that everybody's out to get you based on the person that hurt you 20 years ago, but now you lack relationships and you're programmed so deep into this that you're unwilling to change. You're looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, instead of actually attributing that offense to that person who, if we're being honest, another part to forgiveness. It's a whole story behind why you were even in the crosshairs of that person's offense towards you. And spiritual maturity oftentimes looks like being able to see that somebody's offense towards you is more, way deeper, and actually a lot of times isn't even about you. It's actually about something that happened to them and they didn't know how to deal with it, just like the people before them didn't know how to deal with it. So the best way for me to deal with it is to try to use you to get back at other people. And you got caught in the crosshairs because you couldn't really see and read between the lines of their manipulation. But who can? Because typically when you encounter manipulators, they're really good at hiding. That's why they're great at manipulating. And so we run into a lot of cycles that really keeps us hindered, man. And so I think based on what we read from Lot and based on what we read from his wife and things along those lines, I think there's great power in being able to let go. But I think the struggle to let go ties to a lot of things: identity, value. We don't believe God can do greater than what we feel we're leaving behind. How can it be better? How am I the brunt end of this destruction and hurt and pain? And we look at pain not through the lens of purpose, but we really look at it as something that's destructive and meant to destroy us. And it hinders us, man. So I would look at that, man, as a starting point to this conversation. I see some more comments from him too, so I'd love to continue unpacking that. But just something to breathe on in the beginning, to the impact of looking back. So what would be some of your thoughts, Steve? I'd love to hear. He kind of comes back to maybe some more context to it. Yeah, Twister said, got that MJ mentality. And I took that personally. You can't let things. Yep. Hayes says the bad part too is all of it got me good things, a house, a car, a decent job, but I still get mad about it regardless that they said I couldn't. It's not even an anger at being done wrong and then buried. Even breaking up with the ex I had has led me to find the girl I want to marry one day, but I still hold in that frustration at this woman from 6 years ago. I have no earthly idea why either. I'm excited. I'll be back, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no doubt. So, man, great thoughts there, Hayes. I love everything you're saying. I actually read a little bit up. I just want to share some of your thoughts just because, you know, some people watching on Twitch or YouTube won't see all of your comments here. So I loved, well, I don't know. I did step away to go get some apple juice. I don't know if Great went back and read these, but I thought some of your earlier comments were cool. And it just gives context to some of the stuff I'm going to say. But you said, man, me and you got the same mindset. Everything I got was done to spite someone else to prove them wrong. Even to this day, I hold grudges against people from even middle school because I have used them as fuel forever. I'm very aware it's unhealthy, but struggle to find a powerful driver to replace it. Oh, my Lord. That's what we're going to talk about. I honestly can't think of a person specifically, more of a vague feeling of I got to get back at them because I make up my own slights, whether they are real or not. And kind of how Twister said, like that MJ mentality. A lot of people have said I can be like that too. Man, it gets so deep though. Like when you really start to expand your awareness and see how just petty you can be, Like, so many things can offend me. And I notice that, from people's opinions on my opinions to how people chew their food to all types of little things. And we wonder why we never have peace. But here's what I want to talk about, Hayes. Why I think, or just where I think all this comes from, and the best replacement, because you talked about that. Because that was something, competition fueled me through my entire life. I can, just like you, I can point at a lot of things in my life that exist. And I can say like, yo, my competitive nature drove me here. And if you guys have watched any of my content over the years, you know, I am like the man that's talking to you guys right now is oddly not that competitive. I got to like work hard to bring out some of the competitiveness, especially in like the infinite game of life. What do I mean like that? Like the areas of faith. Think of your relationships, your health, your body, your fitness, mental health, and then your finances, right? Business. That was a place I really thought that was a bloodbath. It had to be competition. Like in the dating world and, you know, finding a mate, a wife, I felt like I was competing with ninjas, and I had to make sure I look better, talk better, have more money, like all of these things, very, very competitive. And I struggle to even see that the world like that now. I can bring competition to like finite games where you need it. Think of like a Madden game or something. Like those are things where you need people to be competitive, but I don't believe competition is supposed to exist in an infinite game. So here's some of the things I realized, Hayes, and anyone else that can relate to this. By the way, let me know if you can relate to that with the one in the chat. If you can relate to just feeling life as a competitive fight, almost like a survival of the fittest type vibe. Now, where do I want? Okay, let me just start with the answer. I think the best thing to replace it with and to fill it is God. And that sounds weird and it sounds cheesy, but I'm going to try to actually explain what that is. And in our coaching group, we talk about this all the time, this idea of being full. And I really feel like that is what these biblical authors are trying to describe when they talk about being full of the Spirit or full of the Holy Ghost. And this, it's like, we think we're just the goal is like God fills us with the Spirit and then we walk on water and then we do these magical tricks as if like that's the purpose to life. And if you just think about that for a little bit, it's like, why did God create us just to have these little magic tricks that we do every now and then? And it's like, I'm filled with the Spirit. I parted the sea, or, you know, I was able to fight people with a jawbone of a donkey or whatever Samson was beating ninjas with. And it's like, yeah, that's cool and all, but what about like your day to day? It might sound far fetched, but I think God clearly created this experience where he wanted love to be the forefront, and he wanted you to feel an experience moment by moment that was powered by that. And if we look at our stress-filled, anxiety-ridden, resentful world, that's not what we typically experience. And I think when we meditate on some of the scripture that Grape was sharing and the scriptures that's in your notes, and we see Jesus's commands to forgive, but also we see him talk about picking up our cross and dying daily. And it's this idea of killing, or not even killing, allowing this selfish ego of ours to die and to have a view of the world that's not so selfish and self-centered. And I think your way to get to this is through working on forgiving some of these people and climbing up that spiritual ladder. But you'll start to see a new world where you don't need anything for anyone, or you don't need anything from anyone. And you don't need to force and manipulate situations to be a certain way, because you can have a looser grip on life. Jesus talks about when you cling to this world, you'll lose it. And what he means by that is like, there's a lot of things that will not go your way. And if you try to force and cram existence into what you think it needs to be, you're going to create this hell on earth experience. Because let's just be real, how many things did not go your way just today? From maybe the time you woke up to how people acted at work, to your kids, I think you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned that you have a wife now or you're going to get your future wife, but when you have that, I promise you she ain't going to always act the way that you want. And the commandment to love your wife like Christ loved the church, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging, and you will really have to forgive. But here's what happens when you start to do that. Like when you, and that's what we sometimes don't get with spirituality too, is like, these things that we want at a higher level, you have to give something up for it. Like you want this peace and this power spiritually, but you got to give up some of your greed, your lusting, your unforgiveness. Like these are things that have to be put on the altar, sacrificed, and everything is energy. So it doesn't go nowhere. It goes up. It goes up into that pace, the peace, the patience, the joy. And so it's when we give up this selfishness and we have a different view on life, we're full of the Spirit of God. And when you're full, you don't need anything else from anybody. My favorite analogy is being full on your favorite food. I could keep giving you that food over and over again. You're not going to want it at a certain point because you're like, dude, I couldn't eat anymore. And so you would become generous by default. You're like, y'all don't want this to go bad. I just got to start giving it out. And your life is about giving. All right. And it's because let's think about it. Hayes, you and I both said we would point at things that we say are good, right? That we got through competition or whatever it may be. But why did we do anything in the outside world, in this 3-dimensional space? It's to feel a certain way on the inside. It's because it made you feel good about having that car or that house or that woman on your arm or those kids. But guess what? If we being real, you probably cried in that car too. It didn't save everything and solve all your problems. You probably cried over that girl, or you talked about your ex, right? At one point, I'm sure you were chasing after her and excited that you guys were together. And then there was a moment you couldn't stand that hoe. How dare she, or whatever, right? And you see how things can change in every single thing. From the friends you get to the clothes you wear, it's because of how it makes you feel on the inside. And so we realize when we're accomplishing these things, like look at some of these celebrities and some of the influencers you look up to that do not have peace, but they have the thing on the outside that you're swearing is going to make you feel peaceful on the inside, but they still don't have it. And just like you don't have, and I didn't feel it, it's because the game ultimately comes back to the inside. And so when we avoid the inner work of forgiveness, right, you can't cover it with a Lamborghini and then still get to peace. What your soul wants at the end of the day is that peace. And it's only going to find it through God. But you see how we're talking about a genuine relationship with God, which is less of a relationship with yourself. We're not talking about your relationship with your church, your relationship with your Bible. You could still have very selfish motives behind doing those. I'm saying approaching God genuinely, allowing. Okay, and here's the very practical nature of what I need you to do. By the way, if you guys check out your notes, exclamation notes in the chat, at the very bottom, we have a resource section. If you go there, there's a school community, and inside of that, it's free for you guys to join. Inside of it, there's something called the Infinite XP that will walk you through how to do this a little bit more practically. And I got a lot of coaching clients that will testify to this. This stuff really works. And Grape even raised his hand in the background. But this stuff, it sounds like I'm telling you something. I'm basically telling you to do nothing. But the nothing that you're going to do will heal everything. So Hayes, when you notice these different things pop up and you get offended, fam, I'm talking about, when I really started to be aware of this stuff, I noticed how offended I would get if my wife wasn't sleeping close enough to me in the middle of the night. Like we wake up in the middle of the night and I notice she was a little bit further and I might pull her a little bit close and she don't notice. And my little feelings get hurt. And of course, we're macho and we're men. And so it's like I'm going to wake up and be like, hey, babe, what's going on? This was bothering me or anything. It's just a little mood that I had when I wake up. And when I was going through life on autopilot, I just thought sometimes I woke up with moods and I didn't know why. And it was these random things happening. It was like, no, these little petty offenses. And then as I start unpacking some of this stuff and actually expressing and talking to my wife, I mean, you guys know my wife, or you guys even follow us a little bit close. My wife has a lot of chronic pain and health issues. She's very uncomfortable when she sleeps. And anyone that's been in any kind of relationship and you've cuddling is dope and it feels good, and it's not always super comfortable like it is in the movies in every position, and especially at night when you just get to move in and you're tangled up, and sometimes she might move and because her back is on fire or something, and it would be my little selfish ego that would take that and twist that, right? I'm saying little things like that. I'm not just talking the big things, but even little things like that. When you notice them, I want you to treat them like a pond that was calm and that had a rock thrown in it, right? So when a rock hits it, right, there's a bunch of ripples, and those ripples are you being offended. It's your mind chattering and your heart throbbing, okay? And it just feeling all that aching, whether it's big or small. And what we usually try to do is suppress it or express it in some wild behavior. And both of those are just almost like us trying to force the waves and ripples out of the pond, which obviously that would just create more ripples. And that's what we do in our mind and our heart. We have little events that hit blockages in our heart, and it makes us feel a certain way. And then our mind's a problem solving mechanism. So it goes to start planning and coming up with scenarios and assuming things. And next thing you know, you're just all muddied in your mind and causing all of this craziness. And usually you'll make yourself feel bad, and you'll say, oh, I don't think this, or you shouldn't do that, or guys shouldn't be upset about that. And you just try to really, really suppress it. And I want you to just imagine yourself patting the pond, and you're just creating more disturbance. And that will cause it to come back, and usually come back stronger. Or you go and express it, and you shout and you try to control people because you're like, what you did hurt me. And so don't ever do that again, so that you don't ever get hurt. But think about that. How much of the world would you have to control, right, to not ever be triggered? And so instead, I just want you to watch it, and I want you to breathe through it. Okay. Really just relax through it. And you may not be able to realize this at first if you've never done any kind of meditation, but like you have this, like you aren't your mind, you aren't your heart, you have these things, and you can just kind of watch those things. And just like when the ripples hit and there's the waves in the pond, I want you to just watch them, and you'll notice in your mind will eventually settle. This too shall pass. Everything everything you've ever experienced, even the most crushing pains, they've passed. Just like clouds. You got little clouds, big clouds, funny looking clouds, dark clouds, bright clouds, and your mind is just like that. And if you'll sit back and watch them long enough, they'll pass. But here's what's beautiful. When you do that, there's a healing process that takes place. When you don't suppress them or express them, they don't come back around the more you do it. And those blockages get healed in the heart, almost like think of like a pipe that's like, or an artery that's like clogged with fat, right? That's the blockages in your heart. And this allowing your heart to stay open as you just feel these, it like almost pushes through and starts to clear those blockages. And you'll notice they stop coming back. And you realize as you do it over and over again, you start noticing, hey, I don't got to get caught up with these train of thoughts and all these things that I get offended for. If I just sit back and watch them and do nothing, I don't say the thing to my wife that starts a fight, and I feel better, and I don't have to give into it. And then you start to realize the power that you have in your will to not get caught up in the mind, to not get caught up in the heart. And so that starts to increase. And then the more you do this, you realize you don't need the things from people that you thought you did. You don't need them to act in a certain way. You don't need the weather to be what you needed it to be. And you just start finding joy in the everyday things. Your joy increases, your peace increases. And then that is what fuels you. That is what replaces, because here's what you notice about, and hopefully you notice this with the competition and the resentment. It's a finite source, and it's a finite source, but the passion and the burning that it creates in your heart is unquenchable. And so you're actually in a trap where you always got to come back to more resentment and more of a grudge to fuel you and more offense to do this. But no accomplishment ever puts out that flame in your heart. And so you get stuck in this vicious cycle of responding to the pain in your heart right? And creating more action that just increases the pain, and you're reacting to the pain and creating more, and you're stuck in this finite loop versus letting all of that go, switching the game, playing an infinite game. Now God is your source, and you have the fruit of the Spirit, and that you by that, and from that perspective, you can't help but be motivated. And it's not for a reason, it's just because this is what God wants you to do. This is being fruitful. You just be fruitful. That's what God is. He's full, right? There's no reason. He created from his abundance, not because he needed something, because then we could do something wrong. God isn't like, I created y'all ninjas, don't fluff this up, okay? You gonna piss a ninja off? God doesn't need that. Nothing he created ever could be from a need, because he's full. And so when we move from that perspective, everything, from the time you put into your family, your job, everything is from this perspective of being full, and who can take it from you? Because you're not looking from anything. The source is God, who is unchangeable, and he's not going anywhere. And so you don't need the stock market or a certain president or someone to agree with you or anything to be okay. You don't need the house. You don't need the car. This is why Christ didn't need none of that. And this is why Christ was able to forgive in the midst of being crucified. He's like, yo, forgive these ninjas. They don't get it. And he wasn't existing to get something from them. He didn't need them to be saved so that he would be okay. He didn't need the gays to stop being gay. He didn't need to march in front of them and for them to change their ways. And that is such a position of love. And you see how that grows and that expands and that infects the people around you. And what can stop that? Not even death. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that is what I have learned over the years of struggling with the finite source of competition and resentment and anger. If we really, really meditate on it, Cameron should come back here in a sec. What the fluff does it get us? Nothing. At the end of the day, because we talk about how we want to feel on the inside, man. My first experience with being suicidal was having all the stuff on the outside that I wanted. At that time, I was making the most money, had the most fame I'd ever had. People knew me, but I wasn't okay on the inside. And just like some of the people some of you guys feel like, if I just had enough money, I'd be okay. How many millionaires do you know that are not okay? Hopefully that shows you that there's still inner work that needs to be done. And why have to go on this wild goose chase for 20 years to be a billionaire and then you'll be significant? Because you could still get the billion and not feel significant. And so let's just go straight to the significance now and then create a business from significance. Then there's no need to cheat people. There's no need to scam or try to shortcut things to get there at a certain time because you're already full. That's how you do business. And that's why I no longer think business and the best business is formed from competition. It's like, okay, like let's say someone is killing it in a certain area. Why would I look at it with envy and be like, ooh, I want what they got and I'm gonna just beat them? It's like, no, like if you're the best over there and you're doing the best content, you're the best, that type of coach, if anything, let me support you in that. Great, you do that. But if I got something unique to offer, right, let me position myself that is unique to me. And who can I help? Who can I thrive with? And let me position myself there. And then I'm not competition with anyone. And now I'm partners with that guy, because it's like, hey, if you get someone like that I'm looking for, you send them my way. And when I get people that you rock, that you need, I'm gonna send them your way. And that is your whole approach on the business, the product you serve, the people you like, the product you're offering, the people you serve. Do y'all see how it changes when you don't need anything from anyone? You don't even need the business to succeed. That's when you're doing it from abundance and with patience. And sometimes people can't understand why God created this world that is clearly in process and in motion and things are playing out through time. God ain't in no hurry. God got all day, all of eternity, because he's not moving out of this rushed, urgent need. It's through truth and purpose. So, all right, rant, TED Talk over. Hopefully that made sense, Hayes.
Man, that was fire. By the way, I do have my wallet. I'll send you your ties here in a bit.
You could Cash App, brother.
Yeah,
Cash App,
I could cash app.
Venmo,
Yeah,
Zelle,
yeah, I
all
like
that. Yeah,
that.
we
I like
good.
that. Yeah. I'll pass them plates. Church doors are now open. So that was phenomenal. I really love that because I think there's a lot of freedom in running your race. That's exactly what you just described in so many ways, running your race. And I think as you were talking, Hayes was just continuing to unpack a little bit of why, he's feeling that, a mixture of, feeling like he has to win. And if he doesn't win, he holds it against himself. There's like a shot that is received when he's rejected. Wait till I'm too good for this job. It's in the sense of like inadequacy. Like if I don't do this, somebody tells me I can't do this. And hopefully I'm summarizing this up in a fair way, Hayes. If not, please let me know. But there's a level of inadequacy that seems to be attached to being told that he can't do something, or somebody's behaviors that in some assumption betrays him. I'm not good enough for you. Why am I not good enough for you? And there's a sense to try and prove that. And so I think everything that you talked about is on point. And I don't even want to add a whole lot to it, but I think it's beneficial to share this just for anybody. And I think it speaks continuously to the perspective of our conversation tonight on forgiveness, because this could easily attach to forgiving yourself. And perhaps feeling like there's a pressure where you feel you have to forgive yourself because I didn't do what I thought I was going to do or what I said I was going to do by a certain age, certain time, certain space in life. I've definitely been there. Let me share this analogy. Might have two, but I hope this works. It's crazy. I spit out analogies all the time now. It's very interesting. I love it. When you go to the airport and you check in your bags at the airport, there's a weight limit to the bags that you are putting on the weight belt that's going to enter into the bottom of the plane as you travel from one destination to another. And when that bag is overweight, there's two things that you have to do, two choices that you can either make. You can either take that bag off that weight scale and remove unnecessary luggage and baggage in order for that bag to make weight to enter the plane, to make it your destination, or you can pay an extra price, an additional price, perhaps an unnecessary price, in order to have that baggage to pass the check in order to make it on the plane. There's something interesting here because that either way, there's a cost that's required. But at the same time of the cost being required, there seems to be a bigger issue that's pointed here. There's too much that you've packed. You are packing unnecessary things, adding unnecessary items to your bag that isn't required for the trip. I mean, it's really like, packing last minute. So you just dump everything into your bag and you realize that there were some things that you didn't need that you packed. And then there are some things that you did need that you left at the crib and you don't have. It's one of those situations. And I really believe that when we pack too much, we weigh ourselves down and keep ourselves from getting to who we're supposed to be and where we're called to go. And in the process of packing too much, we leave behind the things we need and putting in our luggage the items that are unnecessary. Allow the weight of the baggage to represent where you currently are as you're feeling pressured, anxious, depressed, behind, in comparison, all these other things that are just adding weight to your life as you are making your greatest attempt to get from one destination in your life to the next. And it's unbearable to carry that luggage around because there's so much weight in there that's unnecessary. And what's needed is to unpack the unnecessary items in that bag. What's needed is for you to go back into the luggage, which is your life, which is you, whatever you're carrying to get to where you go, to get to where you're going. You need to go back through it and just unpack and throw away and rid of the unnecessary things that you're carrying and attributing to your life as you're trying to get to where you're going. And one of those things needs to be your ego. because your ego is caught up in the past and in the same time trying to use your past to predict the future. But in between the past and the future is the present, which the ego refrains from. But the present is required for you to live in order for you to be able to maximize where you are, who you are, in order to continue to being developed to who you're called to be. And so instead of ego tripping and allowing past circumstances as a means to predict your future that has yet to happen, and the past is predicting scenarios of what you anticipate to happen, it is important that we subside all of that and live in the present. And the only way to begin living in the present is to offload the unnecessary luggage of the ego you're carrying. That's weighing you down, and it's actually not feeding beneficial things into you for you to actually get from one destination to the next. So what's important about this entire picture is that there are some things that we have to be willing to let go if we're going to be able to make it from one destination of life to the next. Your marriage, the woman that you found, the person that you are looking to plan to deal with for the rest of your life, to live with and to love, to have and to hold, to love and to cherish your things in health until death do you part. It is the unnecessary luggage of the cheating, scandal, and heartbreak that occurred to you that is going to keep you from being present in that relationship, loving, nurturing, and maximizing it to the best of its abilities. If you continue to use what happened to you as a predictor of what's going to happen to you, even though it's not happening and won't happen because of everything that's taking place in between, the building, the process, the choosing, the transformation, the growth, and being able to actually analyze what's in front of you and being able to step into it with full confidence. It is the ability to stay in the present that is going to help you maximize that. But you can't be present if you're ego tripping, and ego tripping is luggage in your bag that needs to be offloaded for you to get to where you're going. That weight is unbearable and it's unnecessary. And that oftentimes is what hinders us from being able to get to where we're going. We pack everything and we leave behind the things that we need. So perhaps instead of packing ego into your luggage, we need to offload that, and we need to go back and get peace. We need to go back and get the ability to be present. We need to go back, and instead of using what happened to us as a predictor of the future, allow what happened to us to be a sign to us that perhaps that person doing that is a blessing and not something I need to live in offense by, because your ability to overlook the value I carry and show that through the mishandling of me then shows that you were not prepared for who I am, for where I'm going, or the value I carry. That's why people mishandle you, because they don't know what they see. They can't tell you the value that's in you. So when people mishandle you, that's all they can do. They're not prepared for you. That doesn't mean that you are deserving of the hurt that was caused to you, but it's a lens to look at the hurt that was caused to you, because now that you have healed and have become and have gotten to the other side, instead of looking at that person and wishing that they never did it, you can look at that person and be appreciative that they did, because if they didn't, you wouldn't have found the person that you're with now, who sees and appreciates you in a way that they should have, but did not have the lens to do it because they were looking at you through a lens of dysfunction and not a lens of healing. There is a tremendous difference in being able to look at what you're packing and learning to pack light. Last analogy, I hope this makes sense and lands somewhere with you. It's interesting. I got into a car wreck around this time last year, and I was able to I had to start putting in information, of driver's license and all that other kind of stuff, because I jacked up the car. Boy, I jacked it up. It was total. It was done. It was done deal. And what's so interesting is the car was said that it couldn't be recovered. And of course, I didn't really have a say in it because it wasn't my car. Of course, the parents ultimately went with that. But what I've learned is that even though the insurance company can look at something that is completely wrecked and damaged and tell you that it is not worth recovering because the money that it would take to recover the vehicle would be a whole lot more than perhaps going and getting a different one. They are only giving you this in terms of a suggestion. It's all they can do because they're not the owner of the vehicle. And because they are not the owner or the manufacturer of the vehicle, even though they are trying to tell you its value and worth, they don't have the say on its value and worth because they didn't design it. It is the manufacturer who has that final say, and perhaps it is you who is the owner of the car that has that say to determine what that car is worth and whether or not you want to repair it. Here's all I'm trying to get to you, is that people will come into your life by way of words or actions and will say to you in one way or another, determining your value and what you are or are not worth. But the beautiful thing about knowing your value is no matter who comes in contact with you, no matter the stage and season of life you're in which they contact you, whether you are damaged or you are whole, they don't get to define your value because they are not your manufacturer. God is. And because God designed you, and because God is the one who put value into your life, no matter the damage you've been through, you're not damaged goods. Shout out to Mike Todd, who creates a whole series, Damaged But Not Destroyed. Yeah, you're not in that realm of being destroyed and a total loss. There is still value and you are still available for repair. And we have to be mindful of the people that we get in contact with that will tell us one thing, that we don't have value, we aren't repairable, and we are damaged goods, because if we listen to that long enough, we'll believe it and inherit it over our own lives. And we will lose sight of the value that's actually intrinsically stamped on our lives that says otherwise. And so perhaps a part of letting go of people that have hurt you and moving forward beyond the dysfunction people hurt you through is recognizing the value that you carry. Because if you recognize the value that you carry, no matter the damage and experiences that you've been through, they aren't able to speak so much over you to determine your value. They didn't design you, they didn't create you, and they don't have that level of power. And I think it's only the effort and thought and what we feed into it that actually creates the power it ultimately holds over our lives. So if we choose to put our focus and feed into the right things instead of feeding into the negativity, into the dysfunction, into the devaluing from people who can't see our value, then I think we're actually able to get somewhere and move beyond the hurt that people have caused us. Because truth is, man, sometimes there are people who are hurting us because they're hurt, and they're hurting us because they simply just can't see what's in front of you. They can't see what's in front of them. And that's their loss, not yours. And I don't desire, here's the last thing I'll say. I don't desire to use these messages, because you see it all the time in the formality of self-help, as if you are the perfect being and there's nothing ever wrong with you. If you know that you were not moving authentically, and the results of said action, scenario, situation, circumstance, and behavior you played a role in that elevated that caused that, don't buy into the accept as you are, because as you are needs some work. So let's be honest about that, and let's course correct and recognize and point out those things that are wrong in us, so that way we can live beyond it and come out better, not bitter. But to those of you who have done all the things that you needed to do and you found a way to be hurt, a lot of times people just don't recognize the value that sits in front of them. And whether you have been damaged and they're trying to tell you you're not repairable, or you are the individual who has perhaps carried over too much luggage trying to get from one place to another because of what people have said about you in the past, and has created a formality of ego that's carried out and has held down most of the weight in your luggage. It's time to unload, unpack, and it's time to refocus on the right places of value and who you really are in order to live beyond it, man. Because that weight is not yours to carry. That is not yours to carry. And the longer you choose to carry it, the longer it's going to weigh you down and keep you from where you're supposed to be and enjoying where you are, becoming who you're called to be. That's not worth it. And you're much more worth than that. Hopefully that landed somewhere. But
I love that.
Yeah.
I love all of that, man. So you kind of might have answered this, especially towards the end. You got pretty practical, but I did a last call for questions, and Keyshawn asked, what is a practical way to get to the level of forgiveness that we're talking about here? And I feel like my answer I pretty much gave in terms of, just first off, just guys, perspective is a step. Like meditating on the perspective and everything we talked about here, like how you should view the world, I think is something you start working on. And then learning to just watch and breathe through some of the triggerings that you feel in your heart. I think that's a very, very, very practical step. But you were saying a lot of good stuff, man, about how much we feed. Yeah, how much we can feed things. But if you wanted to kind of distill it down to any kind of maybe practical steps for someone that, all right, they've listened to this whole thing. They're like, all right, I clearly struggle with forgiveness. Y'all have made a great point. I get it. So this episode is about to end. No, how do I take this feeling I feel and execute in my life?
Yeah, I think, well, of course, the perspective, I think how we kind of started this off, of course, from a biblical perspective, one, I forgive because Christ has forgiven me. That's the main principle, right? Without that, I can't really genuinely walk in an authenticity of forgiveness. So I think that's the first part. But I think to make it even more practical, one, I think it's important that I think in the most practical things, we can, one, journal this thing out, right? I'm a real big believer in thought dumps. And a lot of times the anxiety and the tension, I wouldn't even say anxiety, the tension that we feel in our heart and mind over something that was caused to us creates a lot of thoughts in our minds that just kind of rattle back and forth. And it's all day, every day. And we're kind of almost picking them one at a time as they come through. But because it stays up here, it doesn't really go anywhere. And so it just keeps coming back and it's rehearsing. We're falling into that place of rehearsing the offense that's caused. So I would say we need to have an area and a space to where we can just journal these things out. As the thoughts come, we write it down. And I think the power in writing it down is being able to actually see, okay, this is my current thought process. It's no judgment. It's no criticism. I'm just acknowledging the thoughts that are coming in my mind. Now that I've put it on paper, let's go back and compare it to some lenses of truth. Let's compare it to some actual, like, legitimate practicalities here. Okay, is this actually what happened? I know this is a thought I'm having and this is how I'm perceiving it, but is this what actually happened? Secondly, do I know why? Do I really know why this happened? I know she cheated on me. And I know I think she cheated on me because I feel because in some way, shape or form, she thinks I'm not good enough. But is that actually why? Or is that just a narrative that I created to give myself some level of coping to the issue? Right. I also believe, too, that a part of practicality in this is just letting the feelings be present. I am a huge fan in that. I don't believe that we should park at grieving. I don't care what it is that you lose. I don't care if you don't hear anything else from this message, please hear. It does not matter what you lose. There's nothing in this life worth losing that should cause you to grieve for the rest of your life. Your life is not designed to grieve all of it, but there is a season in time where grieving is a part of the healing and we need to mourn and move forward. Again, I'll refer back to Joshua. Moses was the leader of Israel. When we read that, we're like, dang, Moses gone. Well, it is what it is. And we keep reading and we hit Joshua. But Israel was a whole different story. Moses was everything to them. As much as they hated him at times and wanted to go back and refrain from what he was doing, they never really realized the impressions his leadership left on them until he was gone. And then that's when a lot of the flood of grief and all that happened. And yet Joshua is the next person called up. God gives them time to grieve, but then it was also time to mourn and move, because they had somewhere to go. God was calling them to some place, and their life did not stop at the death and loss of someone that, even though as significant as Moses was. And so I think there needs to be some space to feel it. Sometimes we can be so caught up in our minds and trying to grow in self-awareness. Sometimes we can be, I know I'm guilty of this. I can be so self-aware that I actually don't give myself time to be present in the emotions. Like, I'm just feeling like this because of this, because I can point it out all day, every day, and yet still ignore the need to be present in what I'm feeling. Instead of giving immediate validation to the sadness, just be sad. I think that's okay. Of course, I'm not saying go to the lengths of doing any kind of harm or anything of that sort, but just allow those emotions to be present, because I think that sometimes is required. When you don't give yourself time to be present in that, you again, I'll say like this: what doesn't come up and out of your mouth through words will come up and out of your body in actions. Shout out Tim Ross. Give him credit where credit is due. What doesn't come up and out of your mouth in words will come up and out of your body through actions. So put words to what you're feeling. Allow those emotions to come in the waves that they come through, while also getting into a position to continue taking one step at a time on what has offended you and what has egregiously hurt you. I think those are really good applications. I think, I want you to also consider that as you are healing and doing right work mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and of course, even financially, maybe you're forgiving somebody from stealing money from you. So you got to start things over. Like, as you heal, man, there's certain stuff that's more required of you as you heal. Like, I'm gonna be honest, man, maybe if this relates to you, there are some things that you're holding an offense to that, if we're being honest, you've done too much work to still be holding on to that offense. You have. I've been there. I wanted to hold on to a small offense that happened to me years ago that I wanted to use as an excuse to keep me from going to go sit down with a group of friends who continuously wanted to sit with me. I had nothing to say to them. But I've done so much work, and I was really going to allow myself to allow that small offense that if it happened today, I definitely wouldn't. It would be like water off a duck's back, chilling. Like, all right. Right. That's a sign of maturity and growth. And sometimes with maturity, right, to whom much is given, much is required. So like, yeah, I think as a part of that responsibility, I have a responsibility to just move better and do better because I know better now. And so I don't need to keep holding on to this weight. And I'm holding on to it because I'm trying to prove somebody wrong, or because I want to show them up, or because I want to continuously let them know how much better I am than them because they dropped me. You're not winning. You're fooling yourself every step of the way. And I think the people that you encounter, I want you to think about this too, the people that you encounter that actually may want to be a part of your life to such a degree, you're harming because they don't even get to fully experience you. You don't even get to fully experience them because you are too busy trying to use them as a means to prove to people that let you go that they were wrong while they're out living their best life. Nah, I think that's a validation issue. There's some inadequacy there. And I think if you know enough of who you are and your value, you're not too worried about who's leaving you. Not to say it won't hurt, but you're not going to let your life park at the people that left you, because you understand that there's enough value in you to where God can do something amazing in you and bring the people that you need to help you continue moving where you're going. So I think practicality, obviously your perspective, let your lens look through the lens of purpose. Ask God, what is this for? What is it creating in me? Be willing to journal out your feelings, be present in your feelings, continue to mourn and move. And then finally, I would just keep adding the importance that sometimes the forgiveness aspect does take time and process. You might have to take some distance from some people. You might have to step away from some situations and circles and circumstances to get your thoughts together to really comprehend your next steps while also digest what's happened to you. But I want you to continue moving in the process of aiming to forgive. Sometimes we just sit in that process for so long. We don't care to move anymore. We don't care to forgive that person anymore. And that can prove to be an issue because it can show up in other areas of your life. And you'll be wondering why other relationships haven't worked. It's because you haven't actually done the forgiving work needed from the previous people that hurt you. That's carrying over to what you're seeing today. So hopefully that's some level of practicality for you. I really want you to recognize that you have so much value in your life. And when you do the work that's required, forgiveness can be hard and being the bigger person can be hard, but it's what's required of you. You cannot keep allowing yourself to be the smaller person in places you've healed beyond. It's just not that's out of character. That's out of character. And there's more to you than that. And yeah, it can be annoying, and yeah, it can be tiresome. But it's required of you. So you just, it's kind of like you got to get over it at some point. Not necessarily the offense that took place, but more so being the bigger person. Like, I'm tired of being the bigger person. I'm tired. Like, yeah, you just kind of got to accept that it comes with the territory. But I think by way of you doing that, there's more freedom on the other end than there is bitterness and hindrance. So, what about you?
Shoot, no, that's it. Like I said, I have nothing to add to that. Shout out to my guy Seville. He said you're a great speaker. He asked who you were. This ninja named Sean. You know what I mean? I found found him on the side of the road, begging for food one day. I was like, hey, brother. Yeah. No, have you ever seen that testimonial? There's like this guy that was like a homeless man and he went viral. And now he is like the spokesperson for Kraft's macaroni and cheese. Have you heard that? He had like a real deep voice. You ain't heard that? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I was going to try to recreate that for you. But yeah, man, Sean been rocking with us here for a few years over here on the Truth Project, our weekly Bible study. But I don't have anything to add to that. I think you killed that. You're the hot hand right now. So I'm actually going to go back to you for this last question here.
Sure.
Yeah, the radio voice guy, Nick, like, you know.
Oh,
he going to fluff it up.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I forgot how he got his start, but he was like legit a homeless guy. Someone made a video of him.
He said, yeah, he was the deep voice and big teeth. Fluff you, Nick.
Yes, with the big old teeth. Yeah, that guy. So anyway,
I'm offended.
You should be. That's what I was going for. So Nick asked a great question, I think, to wrap it up here, unless anyone has one last question to get us out of here. But he says, let's put it on the other side. So how can we ask for forgiveness when we wrong someone? And if they don't forgive us, how do we handle that? So, I'll warm it up just to give you a break because you was going in. But
sure.
Briefly, I would say, of course, with humility, you know what I mean? And understanding that people have a right to feel, people have a right to feel emotions just like you do. We have a tendency to want to have people judge us by our intentions and want to give us space, but we don't give them that same grace when they're going through things, and we look through their emotions through our perspective and how they affect us. And so I think it's helpful for you to show some empathy and jump into their perspective and understand how it might have felt to be wronged in whatever way you did. And I think just in the actual communication, two things I like to lead with is validation and reassurance. So just validate them, let them know that what you did was wrong. They ain't tripping. You apologize, because sometimes we apologize and there's ego packed into it. Like, I'm sorry, I offended you. Well, no. Just say sorry that what you did might have been offensive, or that you didn't consider their feelings when you were going about things. Don't try to make it seem like they're soft. Well, I'm sorry that pissed you off, or I'm sorry you're upset. Let's validate what they're feeling. Like, nah, I stole the money out your purse. I could see how that's upsetting. Or even if it's something smaller, maybe myself, like, like I was saying earlier with my wife, like, hey, I apologize for having an attitude over you being uncomfortable at night or something. Like, that's an extremely unreasonable thought for me. And I just get it. I get how you could be frustrated with me. So just really take the time, and, if you maybe damaged things in some area or done some things wrong, just reassure them that you're working on it, that you're going to do better, that maybe if you miscommunicated something, maybe reassure that you didn't mean that, whatever that may be. And those are very practical ways to just communicate that you understand what you did wrong and you got to work on it. Now, in the event that they don't forgive you, again, I think life happens for a reason. Like, life is trying to life is giving us things to work on and exposing things in our heart and giving us raw material to work with. And so I think if they don't forgive you, that's a great opportunity to work on a lot of the things we've been talking about, and especially things I covered in my last rant about just being okay. Because it's possible to mess up and certain people won't be in your life, because I don't know if we drilled this point home enough in this, but like Grape said, we've talked about forgiveness a lot here, but just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that there's restoration and that they're right back to where they were. You still could maybe forgive someone, but break up with them. Let's say, you know, yeah, you were to find out some information about someone and they're doing some things with some little kids, you might be like, hey, I forgive you, brother. That don't mean you babysitting my kids though, right? I'm gonna call someone else as a babysitter. And so it doesn't mean they have to be in proximity or anything like that. And so because of that, you might be on the other end of that, and you might have to grow through that, might have to heal through that. Like Grape said, there's room to grieve, but can't be your whole life. And so I would argue there's not a whole lot to do. I think some people want to have strategies like, how do you win your ex back no matter what? I don't think you can sometimes, no matter what. I think leading with the stuff I talked about is a great way to try it, but you can't force relationships. You can't force people to forgive on your timing or at all. And so I think sometimes with that, we learn as we get older, we kind of through those stings and things that we can't go back in time on, we learn to treat every moment with the precious respect that it deserves. Like the moment that we have now took all of existence to get here. Think of all of our family tree that had to come together and all the circumstances that have to lead to this very moment. Here is holy. This is a powerful moment right here. And so it causes you to be present in the way that Grape was talking about and honor everything. The annoying moment with your kid, even the arguments. It's so weird, y'all. My mindset getting so creepy. I love what some of the stuff Keyshawn says in our calls. He's like, yo, I be struggling to be sad or upset about things. I am so grateful and honored to fight and have misunderstandings with my wife. Like even the times that aren't great, I love that. I love journeying with someone and getting to know them, still getting to know someone over and over and over that I've known since high school. And a lot of that looks like being in the trenches, in the mud, looks like forgiveness. And I love that. I eat that stuff up, man. And so yeah, before I get too distracted, chasing the rabbit holes, that's what I would say, man, in terms of how I would go about asking for forgiveness and then going about maybe getting through if they did not. What would you say to that, Grape?
Shoot, man. I mean, you said much of it. I think man, I was going to start with something, but I got a few notes here. So, I mean, you covered the humility. Again, I think just being brief, I think anytime you ask for forgiveness, you aren't the one that is setting the timetable for when that person is to forgive you. Nor are you the one in control of how the process goes about. Right. And so you have to give time and space. I don't get to set the terms. I was the offender. I mean, I don't get to do that. And so, let things happen and unfold naturally. You don't get the privilege of coming back to that person and saying, hey, you should be over this by now. It was a few weeks ago, it was a few months ago, a few years ago. Like, that's not how it works. And so be patient with that, and know that it's a process. I would also say too, when it comes to them not like when you ask for forgiveness and they don't, I definitely 1000% side with Dion on a lot of those things. I would also add to it, and maybe a more way of in a way that I've understood it too. It's one of those things where you just have to chalk it up to a learning lesson. I did what I did. It was an egregious offense in some way, and enough of offense to sever the relationship. I have come around to learning why that behavior is not acceptable. I have actually chosen to do work required to where that behavior is not repeated in future relationships. And I know it went wrong here, but it won't go wrong there. I messed it up here. I messed up this relationship here. But I'm doing the work because I don't want that to be repeated in my next relationship. So next time it won't end like this. It won't be like this. And I'm going to, preserve the relationships that I currently have and that I'll build in the future. And so I think that's sometimes how you have to go about it in a lot of ways. And I will say this too, man, like, sometimes we look at those things and moments and we feel like we need closure. I think one thing that I'm growing in, and I'm still growing in, I'm not even going to talk as if, in a lot of this conversation, I don't aim to speak as if I have it all figured out or that I've won the game of forgiveness. I'm telling you, it is a daily practice. I'm talking about wanting to be married and have a family. I better learn how to forgive, because it's going to be a long road if you don't. So I would say what I'm learning is a lot of times when we convince ourselves we need closure, we really don't. In some aspect, we're telling ourselves we need closure because maybe we're hoping that by way of coming back to this person, that they'll accept us, they'll forgive us, and they'll want us back in any kind of way that we once had them, or even at a greater scale. I need to know why this person said no to me. I need to know why this person doesn't want me in their life. I need to know why this person can't forgive me. And, in any kind of way, we almost try to play politician. We try to manipulate, or perhaps we might not even go as far as to manipulate. We just want to try to put the pieces together and solve the puzzle as much as necessary. And I'm gonna be honest, man, a lot of times that's not needed. And I think the absence of closure is evidence of the necessity of restoration and value. I'm gonna say that slowly because I want to go somewhere with that. The absence of closure is evidence of the necessity of restoration and value. Sometimes when we are aiming to pursue after that closure, it's trying to give us some level of validation back. I'm not as bad as this offense makes me out to be, or I'm not as horrible of a person, or I'm not as ugly, disgusting, rude. I'm not as nasty. I'm not as unwanted as this person makes me seem because of their departure from me. So when we go and get that closure in some aspect, we believe that by doing so, okay, cool. So I'm not that bad. I'm not that nasty. I'm not that rude, not that mean, not that ugly. I'm actually wanted. I can be loved by this person. I really want this person to love me and take me in. So it almost kind of goes into a place of people pleasing in a way. I'll do anything. And I do think in some aspects, especially if it's a relationship where you do want to restore, of course, you want to be willing to do what it takes to restore it, not to the point of demeaning, demoralizing you as a person or making you beneath, or perhaps if this individual wants to take it in a route of holding it over your head, right? They want to make you suffer for as just an ounce of what you caused them. That just means they aren't forgiven, right? They aren't forgiving you of that because they're not willing to let go of that offense. They're trying to use it as a means to get what they want, even if that comes to a point of manipulating you. I would say the absence of closure, okay, that it's revealing that there's a need of restoration and validation, because if I keep coming back to you and needing closure from you, there's something in me that feels inadequate. And I need to become understanding enough and comfortable enough in who I am, loving who I am as I am, and knowing the work I need to put in to become more of who I'm called to be, to where when people walk out of my life for whatever reason, or when people refuse to be a part of my life again, maybe after something I caused or something they caused, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. I can hold the tension though of it hurting, and still not coming back and chasing after somebody who doesn't want to be a part of my life. It doesn't matter how dope you are. I shared a message on this on my TikTok yesterday. It doesn't matter how dope you are. It doesn't matter how amazing you are, how articulate you are, how well spoken and well looking you might be. There is nothing you can do to make somebody who does not want to be in your life to be in your life. You cannot do it. And I think stressing over that is, again, going back to the baggage claim. It's unnecessary. And it puts a lot of weight and stress on you. And so, yeah, I think if somebody is unwilling to forgive them, man, that's their prerogative, as Prophet Bobby Brown would say. No, I'm just playing. But it's their decision. And I think the best thing you can do in that moment is honor that decision and respect it, and not try to push boundaries to get what you want, and just learn from it. And to the person that would accept it, hey, I've made the decision. I do want to forgive you. I do want to make things work. You want to be willing to do the work necessary so that offense isn't something that's repeated. And you want to give that person time and space to process that mug, man. You just can't set the terms. You just can't. And, while I'm on the subject, I know we're all familiar, or at least most of us might be familiar with the term spinning the block. right? I'm gonna spin the block on him. You know, I'm gonna come back around. I think I'm on the side of learning, and this kind of relates to forgiveness, because obviously in relationships and spaces like that, you know, that's something that we might consider, or maybe that person has considered to spin the block and come back around to us. And I've only seen so far that it works when both people do the work. When both people do the healing work, man, that's required for that to be something that is actually productive if coming back. A lot of relationships need to stay where you left them. Not because it always has to be evil, ugly, and nasty, but maybe because, again, I mean, there's so many things to it. Maybe the season's up. Maybe it's not something that works out well with where you are. You don't have the capacity to invest into it like it needs to be, right? Or maybe that it's required. But sometimes relationships just need to stay where they are. And I do think sometimes, man, again, this is just the tension, and this is just where I'm at, and what I'm learning too is like God can sometimes put some people back in front of you, man, that you never thought would come back around, that you never thought you would encounter again. And because of the work you've been doing, you actually have something worth investing into them. It may not be a relationship again. It may not go the long haul. It may not go the distance. It may not become all that you thought it would be. But hey, you have something at this point in life that's worth investing into. And I think if there is a tug on your heart that perhaps God is maybe wanting to use you to encounter this individual and to pour into this individual some kind of way, despite the offenses that have been caused, I would lean into that, man, because I'm growing more and more in a place of wanting to prefer the reflection of God's heart than my own selfish wants. And sometimes doing so is at the cost of my comfortability and selfishness by having a conversation with somebody that I kind of don't want to, and I kind of don't want to sit with, and I kind of don't want to encounter. And, but I've seen amazing things come out of that. And because I have, it allows me to be confident that, hey, you know, yeah, they hurt me. They did. But God has covered me with community, with counsel, with people that I've been able to lean on that has really helped me process the initial pain, to where if they ever did come back around and there was ever a door of opportunity for conversation, not even necessarily to rehash or rehearse what happened, but perhaps there's something different to talk about and discuss that I have in me to give to them. You know, I want to consider that. Because at the end of the day, I want to prioritize being a conduit of God's love and not allow my selfishness to get in the way. And that is a big, I think, a pretty nice nugget to sit on when it comes to forgiveness. Because sometimes that's in front of you, bro. And it sucks. It's not something you're going to want to do immediately. You know, but if it's something that God puts in front of you, I'd say consider it. So.
I love that. I think that's a great way to wrap it up here, man.
Sweet.
This was a good conversation. I really love the stuff y'all were talking about in the chat, man. Nick, appreciate all your contribution. Hayes, I think you kind of were the lead for a lot of this today, so we appreciate you. But, you know, Keyshawn, Glitch, Sully, we see you guys in there, man. And then everyone on YouTube and Twitch, we appreciate you guys, man. Great combo.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate you guys a lot. Shout out DG1. Bernard, SBO, Saya, King Rose. Bernard said something in the chat too. He was talking about his dad, or their dad. He left when they were young, so they had no father figure later in life, tried to make up for it, and they were getting closer. And upon asking if the father regretted leaving, he said no, and they lost respect for him. Hopefully what we shared throughout this conversation just gives you enough to perhaps consider. I do want to lastly, I'll say this, maybe perhaps to that. And that is a huge, huge pill to swallow. I don't know if I necessarily feel like I have what it takes to speak to that directly, because I don't know what that kind of pain is like. Having somebody that you literally came from, like biologically, to tell you that they didn't regret leaving, and perhaps receiving that as if, man, that you didn't want me, you know, like that's a lot. It's a lot to carry. And I know, Dion, you might have some words on that too, but I would just say this, not necessarily. And I guess I'll say this in general.
Before he says that was a perfect example of how to validate someone, y'all. He did a great job, even though he's never experienced it. If you notice, he Like if I wrote that comment, I would feel validated. So great job. Great.
Oh, dang. I've been doing it's kind of, I don't mean this. I've been doing that for so long. Sometimes I don't even recognize it. And
That's how it should be.
I appreciate
That's
that.
how it should be.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
I would say this, man. There are a lot of things that people do that we don't understand why they do it. And not only that, but there's so much story behind the behaviors people exhibit. And it doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains it. And I think something to perhaps consider in your own journey in healing is not necessarily trying to figure out, come to grips, conclusions that the person that gave birth to you or played a role in giving birth to you did not want you. And you're trying to figure out what's wrong with you and why you aren't enough to be wanted by the person who gave birth to you. Maybe there are some really deep, dark things that maybe you'll never know and come to conclusion of that led to this individual departing when they did. And then furthermore, him doubling down on that. I can understand a lot of losing respect for someone in that manner. And losing the desire to meet, sit, conversate, any of that, because there's a lot of things that we assume in such a statement as if I'm not wanted. But there's so much power in perhaps understanding stories and somebody arrived to such a conclusion where they were at that time of life that made them feel that that was a great decision, the better decision. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. But it does just explain some of it. And I think even though a father figure was not presented to you at a young age, I am beyond grateful that there is a greater father who is not a reflection of the earthly fathers that we have or haven't had, but he's the one that sets the precedents and standards for how earthly fathers ought to act. So when things like that happen, we know who to go to, who sets the precedents and standard. So we don't look at the absence of an earthly father and attribute it to the heavenly father over us. And I'm reminded of Psalm, I believe is it 34:8, even though my mother and father forsake me, the Lord has been with me. And I think that speaks a lot of volume. And allow your heavenly father, as you nurture a relationship with him, even though you may not have had a father figure earthly, to set that model as you grow, because you don't necessarily have a blueprint for how this is supposed to go. Have grace for yourself in that season and transformation and journey, but allow what the Father heavenly speaks to you and transforms you in. Allow him to set the standard and precedents for how you ought to live for you, your family, and your future children, if you are there, perhaps wherever you might be. Because that will do a lot of healing and restorative work in you, beyond perhaps what you feel you're capable of in this current moment. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dee, because I think it would speak a whole lot more directly.
I think you killed that, man. I really do. I think, and you speak on a lot of things that I told you this, that maybe you haven't experienced before, but a lot of things summarize back into the human heart, and we're all connected. We're all related. And because you spent a lot of time, hold on one sec. I got kids knocking on the door, but I'm sure I ain't got nothing to say there. You can close this out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So man, again, man, we appreciate you guys so much for another great conversation. He said, I'll try not to use these spaces as therapy dumps, but we love these conversations, man. Listen, we don't act and pretend to be anybody's therapist, but these conversations, man, are important. And so unpacking them to the best of our abilities is always the goal and the aim, man. So we appreciate you for your participation. That's where it's at. So any questions, thoughts, comments, anybody, please drop them. Obviously not now because we're signing off, but in conversations, and we appreciate that so much. So glad this was a great topic and you guys were able to enjoy and open up a little bit about this. Listen, we got homework attached to the notes. If you guys, man, I don't know why I can't get off that. Let me say this last thing. anybody who has experienced that, I just want to be a soft reminder that you are enough. You're enough. You're enough, man. You're enough. I know the people that have left you have abandoned you, and it's really hard to overcome that offense. But I think part of overcoming it is recognizing the value that is intrinsically set upon you that is above the people leaving you. And it's never been determined by the people who remain in your life. And I just really want to speak to that you are enough, and allow the transformative work that God does in your heart to set the precedence and standard for who you're called to be and the life you're called to live, the people that are around you that you are called to invest into, to love, to be present among. Allow that to be something that continuously transforms you, and allow God to do that work in you. There are so many people who are without blueprints in this life on how to navigate things. So I think it goes without saying that along the way, you're going to make mistakes, but it's because you were never set the tone. You were never told how to do it. You were never given the blueprint on how to do it. So a part of that is going to be making mistakes, but don't allow those mistakes and poor decisions to keep you distant from God and cause you to feel as if you are now a part of the same group that you've caused so much, or you've attributed so much offense, hatred, and non-forgiveness to. Allow those mistakes to be something that you show grace over, and allow those mistakes to draw you closer to who God is, and reestablishing and reasserting yourself back into who he's called you to be. Speak kindly over yourself, nurture yourself, meet the needs that you felt you weren't able to get as a result of the absence of people in your life that were supposed to be there, parental figures, things of that sort. But be patient, and have so much grace for yourself, and know that it's a journey. And no matter the absence, and no matter who's absent, no matter the absence, God can fill it. And it's something that God has a great specialty in doing, filling what you felt you've been without, because he's the bread of life. So really, really rest with that. And that's it. I just felt like I had to share that. Hopefully that landed with anybody in there. But anyway, we appreciate you guys so much for tuning in to this conversation. The notes, again, I will drop them in the Discord for you guys to check out. I'm going to send a message to Luke because I told him, dang, I appreciate you, Luke. I said that out loud because, I figured you. Anyway, man, we appreciate you guys so much. And until next week's conversation, be easy and be breezy. God first. God bless.